of all the Memphis Grizzlies players in Summer League, everybody wants to talk about Kenneth Lofton Jr. Everybody wants to talk about Kenneth Lofton Jr. A lot of people want to talk about player. A lot of people think he deserves minutes. But the question is, where do you put Kenneth Lofton Jr.? Where? Let's talk about it right here, right now, coming up on Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host today, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal, Damichael Cole, right back home, back in Memphis, Tennessee, the most beautiful land in the world. Oh, it feels so good to be back home, to be back in my bed, to be back, to be outside of Vegas. Vegas is fun for a couple days, few days here, few days there, but I'm glad I'm back home. So thank you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies, everyone. Appreciate you for tuning in each and every day. Make sure you continue to tune in everywhere. Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you listen, wherever you watch, Locked On Grizzlies is there. We appreciate you for tuning in. Me, my co-host Joe Monax, who's on vacation right now. We both appreciate you for tuning in very much. And continue to tune in because we got a lot of good stuff coming the rest of this week, but we'll save that for later. The now is Kenneth Lofton Jr. If you've been watching Summer League, watching the Grizzlies in Summer League, watched the Grizzlies last year, you watched the Memphis Hustle, you watched Louisiana Tech play basketball, you watched Team USA under-19 team a couple years ago, you're very familiar with Kenneth Lofton Jr. And the thing about Kenneth Lofton Jr. is when he is on the floor, buckets come afterwards. This man is instant offense. I think he's improved this summer a lot in his all-around game. He said he think he's improved a lot this summer in his all-around game. And it just leads you to, like, what's next for him? What's next for Kenneth Lofton Jr.? Because I always have a prerequisite to when people think they're making a bold, hot take, but it's usually lukewarm because you don't fill in all the bases to make it a hot take or to make it a bold take. Here's this thing. Let's make this a rule, Grizzlies fan. This is a rule. If you think a player who is currently outside of the Grizzlies rotation belongs in the rotation, from now on, you must say who should that player replace. Because it's easy to say, yeah, Zaire Williams deserves more minutes. Jake LaRavia deserves more minutes. David Roddy deserves more minutes. Kenneth Lofton Jr. deserves more minutes. But somebody's got to get replaced in a lot of those scenarios. And in the case of Kenneth Lofton Jr., do I think he's ready to play? I've said it time and time again. Me and Joe Monex have had this conversation. I think he's ready to play. I think he's ready to be an impact player at the NBA level. A guy who can come off the bench right now and just give opponents fits. Like, he's tough. Watched him up close. The physicality, the finesse, the smoothness with the jumper, the playmaking, the hands defensively. The guy's got it. Like, don't get it twisted. Kenneth Lofton Jr. can play. But the question is, okay, you think Kenneth Lofton Jr. deserves minutes? Put a name to it. Who is he replacing in that front court rotation? Let's zoom through the names real quick. One you got at center, Steven Adams. Steven Adams, for my money, is one of the best starting centers in the NBA. Not because he's some guy that's going out there and scoring 22 and 12 every night, but Steven Adams has an elite skill set where he is the best at what he is good at doing. Guys will tell you, Steven Adams is the strongest player in the NBA, period. Steven Adams is the best screen setter in the NBA, period. Steven Adams is the best offensive rebounder in the NBA, period. He's great at what he does. Jaren Jackson Jr., enough said. This is an all-star. This is a guy who will be playing for Team USA this upcoming in a couple weeks. They go out for camp. We'll talk more about that later. I got a lot on that as well. But Jaren Jackson Jr., Steven Adams, I don't have to talk about those two guys too long from that standpoint. You know what they bring to the table. If Kenneth Lofton Jr. is going to crack the rotation, you're talking about potentially getting past Santi Aldama and Xavier Tillman Sr. right now. Brandon Clark will have when he gets here because Brandon Clark won't be ready at the beginning of the season. Right now, we're talking about Santi Aldama and Xavier Tillman Sr. Just in the same way we feel that Kenneth Lofton Jr. is improving to the summer and he's getting better, I can make the same argument for Santi Aldama. Santi Aldama, if you look, again, yes, he had overall wasn't a good defensive year. A bad defensive year, I'll say it. Had a bad defensive year overall if you just look at the totality of it. But if you put your eyes on him, put your eyes on Santi Aldama and look at the physical tools, guy's 6'11". He can slide his feet. You put him on a switch against a guard, he can hold his own. I mean, my point is Santi Aldama has the tools to improve just in the way that a lot of people want Kenneth Lofton Jr. to improve. I don't have to get on the offense. I mean, the three-point shooting is plus, and the Grizzlies need that. He has touch. He has to get stronger to take advantage of those mismatches better and whatnot. But then there's Xavier Tillman Sr. Again, all of the aforementioned guys have things that they are really good at. Xavier Tillman happens to be a super versatile defender. It's one of his best skill sets. He can guard point guards and switches, hold his own, shooting guards. I mean, I've said it time and time again. We've seen Taylor Jenkins look at Xavier Tillman in the eye and say, hey, you got Kawhi Leonard. Hey, you got LeBron James. Then on the next day, ho-hum, hey, you got Anthony Davis. Like, that's where we are. So between those guys, Steven Adams, Xavier Tillman Sr., Santi Aldama, Steven Adams, Jaren Jackson Jr., where are you going to put Kenneth Lofton Jr.? You can argue for a five big rotation, but won't get anywhere. Steven Adams is going to play 26, 27 minutes. Xavier Tillman's probably going to fill in the rest of those. You're going to have Jaren Jackson Jr. moving in between the 4 and 5. This doesn't even factor in the fact that Jake LaRavia, David Roddy, those guys could be in the conversation to get some small ball 4 minutes. Because, look, I've seen Jake LaRavia up close in Summer League. That dude looks a little bigger. David Roddy, enough said. Big body Roddy. Those dudes can hold their own in some small ball 4 roles. And guess what? The way the roster is currently constructed, again, this is why we're talking about why it's going to be hard for Kenneth Lofton Jr. to crack this rotation. The way the roster is currently constructed, you're going to want Desmond Bane, Luke Kennard on the floor together a lot. You got Marcus Smart. You got Ja Morant potentially, when the suspension is over. You got Derrick Rose. You got a lot of guards who can play. And those minutes are going to be spread out over 3 positions to the point where if you want Jake LaRavia on the floor, if you want David Roddy on the floor, and both guys, we'll talk about it a little bit later on this show, both those guys, I think they look well to me in Summer League. All that is leading to the point of it's going to be tough for Kenneth Lofton Jr. And it's all circumstance. That's what I'm trying to convey here. The reason we're talking about this, Kenneth Lofton Jr., where is he going to play? It's going to be tough for him to crack the rotation, is the simple fact that it's just circumstance. If you look at the small forward position, there isn't a quote-unquote starter at this day at that position. That's why we have this conversation about David Roddy getting these minutes, Jake LaRavia getting these minutes, Zaire Williams getting these minutes, because there's an opening there, and it's for the taking it. One of those guys can take it. Maybe not as a starter, but they can get big minutes at that spot. Whereas power forward and center is pretty locked down. And then you look at the backups, Xavier Tillman Sr., Santi Aldama, pretty decent years last season. I tweeted out recently because I don't want to make it look like I'm contradicting myself here in any type of way. So I'll clarify something. I tweeted out watching Kenneth Lofton Jr. the other day. I said it's going to take some magic to keep that guy off the floor this season. And I wholeheartedly still do believe that. Like, and the magic, it may be all of those guys just getting much better. But the fact is, he's ready to play. Grizzlies got to figure out where to play him. They got to figure it out. I think it's going to be tough because all those players that I mentioned, they provide, something that the Grizzlies don't have if they're not on the floor. Kenneth Lofton Jr. provides the Grizzlies with instant offense that's levels above Steven Adams, Xavier Tillman Sr., Santi Aldama. You can make an argument. His instant offense in stretches may give you more than what Jaren can give you. In stretches, Jaren is more talented, more skilled. I don't have to get into that whole conversation. But his aggressiveness on the offensive end will, whereas we've had conversations about Jaren Jackson Jr. and his aggressiveness. So the point is, okay, I think most of us can agree. Kenneth Lofton Jr. deserves to be on the floor. But the Grizzlies have a lot of time to figure this out. Rest of summer league, preseason. How do you put this guy on the floor, and where do you put him on the floor? Speaking of summer league, we're going to talk about summer league coming up here in a few, because guess what? Still got a couple more summer league games here, and the Grizzlies have already shown us a lot. So the question now is, what's left for us to see in summer league? We're going to talk about that next, coming up on Locked On Grizzlies. But before we talk about that, we got to talk about one of my favorites out there, and that's Birddogs. Because look, you seen me recently. You saw me in Vegas. You might have saw me in my Birddogs, man. Because I'm a big fan of Birddogs, and the thing about Birddogs is it's one of the best options out there. If you like your shorts, you like your shorts out there, you can go to birddogs.com/lockedonnba. You can get you a free Yeti style tumbler with any purchase on your first visit as well. Because look, that's what I like about Birddogs. Birddogs, they do the same exact thing as all these other shorts that you guys like to wear, but this Birddogs fixed this issue. The issue that a lot of people go through with shorts is they can be stiff, they can be restricting. Birddogs, you don't got that problem because Birddogs are more stretchy. You can get a slim fit without having to sacrifice your movement, because I like to play ball. Everybody knows I'll get on the golf course every now and then, and Birddog uses an anti-stink sweat wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. I'm telling you, I needed Birddogs while I was in Vegas in that 105-degree weather. But look, for you to go get your Birddogs, all you have to do is go to birddogs.com/lockedonnba or enter the promo code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for a free Yeti-style tumbler. That's birddogs.com/lockedonnba. Go get it right now, because look, you ain't going to want to take those Birddogs off. I can promise you that. Coming up on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to talk about Grizzlies in Summer League. What's left to prove? Let's talk about it. Coming up on Locked On Grizzlies. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies, everyone. I'm Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal here in Memphis, Tennessee, back at home and back with you talking about the Memphis Grizzlies. And we're back to talk about Summer League. The Grizzlies have a Summer League game coming up later on tonight. And this is kind of a preview of that game, but not really a preview of that game, because it's a preview of just what's left to come in Summer League, but more so what's left for the Grizzlies to prove in Summer League. And when I say the Grizzlies to prove, I'm talking about the guys, the guys I'm talking about: Jake LaRavia, David Roddy, Vince Williams, Jacob Gilyard, Gigi Jackson, Kenneth Lofton Jr. What's left for those guys to prove? Because the other guys, your Frankie Ferrari, your Matthew Hurts, Timmy Allen, those guys, this is a great opportunity for them. They're trying to prove, they're trying to put some stuff on film for everyone to see. But let's focus in on the guys who are currently rostered on the Memphis Grizzlies main roster. Start with Jake LaRavia and David Roddy, 2 first-round picks from a couple years ago. Last year, but going into their second seasons in the NBA. What's left for those guys to prove? Here's my argument. Nothing. Nothing. Jake LaRavia has already shown me what I needed to see. I told you guys a week ago when we were previewing Summer League, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, whenever it was. All I wanted to see Jake LaRavia do is get up shots on a volume because they're going to fall. They're going to fall eventually. And what we've seen from Jake LaRavia is 9 3-point attempts per game, 34.5% three-point shooting. I'm done. That's all I need to see. I know he can put the ball on the floor and get to the basket. I know he has the in-between game. But guess what? As all of these players have kind of alluded to in a way, when you're playing on the floor and it's Marcus Smart, Desmond Bane, John Morant, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., Steven Adams, your offensive role is going to be minimized. They're not going to ask you to do as much as we're seeing these guys do in Summer League. And for Jake LaRavia and David Roddy, a lot of their role is going to be taking three-pointers, corner three-pointers, wide open three-pointers, attacking closeouts, getting to the basket, and swinging the basketball to an open teammate. That's going to be a lot of their offensive role. You're not going to see Jake LaRavia operating with the ball at the top of the key, calling Steven Adams for a screen. Like we've seen Jake LaRavia do some shoot some three-pointers off screens and stuff here. Taking all that with a grain of salt until offensive role is expanded a little bit more. But I don't see anything more from him. At this point, it's just he's just showing us what he's got in the bag. Same thing for David Roddy. Same exact thing. I don't need to see anything more from David Roddy. The three-point shooting, we've seen it. We see it. We know he's going to shoot three-pointers. He's going to be aggressive in hunting those three-pointers. As I talked about in our most recent episode before this one, David Roddy is doing a better job of getting to the basket. We call him Big Body Roddy, but we didn't see enough of that last season. We didn't see enough of the big body getting to the rim. You guys are too little. Get out of my way. We're seeing a little bit more of that in Summer League. He's getting to the free throw line more. That's all I needed to see. I don't need to see much else. I'm not going to put too much stock in, David Roddy guarding these guys when I've seen David Roddy guard LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, Luka Doncic. The list goes on. But I'll say this. The one guy that I still very anxious to see him perform in these next couple games throughout Summer League is G.G. Jackson. I had a conversation with G.G. Jackson out in Vegas, and I just want to say this. Very well-spoken young. He's from South Carolina. Has that previous relationship with John Morant. And those two go way back. I don't know how far people know how far those two go back, but actually T. Morant used to cut G.G. Jackson's hair. Like, I learned a lot talking to him. And, John's about 5 years older than G.G., so they weren't necessarily hanging out as much as G.G. would be in the barbershop and his older cousins would be with John Morant because, he was too young. He's getting his hair cut and whatnot. But G.G. Jackson, speaking about him in Vegas, what to see from him. See the three-point shooting in dosages. We've seen him take it off the dribble in the post-up game. I want to see more. Okay, we got that nice post-up from Salt Lake City that he did where he went to the hook shot. That's the only time I've seen that. Where has it been? Where has it been? Like, we need to see more of that. I want to see G.G. go off the dribble more. And one thing about this kid that I've noticed is he's extremely humble. Extremely humble, which is good for someone who was a number one player coming out of high school at one point. But you know what? He said it himself. That experience humbled him. Reclassifying and going to South Carolina and becoming a second-round pick, it's not how he envisioned things playing out. That experience humbled him in a way, and you're seeing it. He basically told me, look, I understand when I'm on the floor with Jacob Gilyard, David Roddy, Jake LaRavia, I'm going to be a corner man, which basically is his job is to sit in the corner, wait on the ball to come to him, take spot up three-pointers, attack closeouts, and do the small things that I was talking about earlier with Jake LaRavia and David Roddy when they're on the floor with the main Grizzlies, with John Morant, Desmond Bane, etc. G.G. Jackson understands when he's on the floor with D-Rod, LaRavia, Jacob Gilyard right now in some of that's probably going to be his role. But when he's on the floor with the other guys, the guys I mentioned like Frankie Ferrari, Timmy Alley, Matthew Hurt, it's time to show us the bag. I really want to see what else he has left. Gigi is a tantalizing guy, and right now it sounds like he's going to be on a two-way contract. So let's see, what he's going to show, when he's playing with the hustle, when he's playing with the Grizzlies. A lot left to see from him over the course of summer league. So that's the main guy that I'm going to be watching. But speaking of two-way contracts, the Grizzlies have two players currently on two-way contracts right now. Vince Williams, Jacob Gilyard. They've both shown us some things in summer league as well. What's their future outlook with the Grizzlies? Going to talk about that next coming up on Locked On Grizzlies as well. But before we get to that, I want you to remember that today's episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. So you think about BetterHelp, go to betterhelp.com/lockedonnba. And look, I love everything about BetterHelp because BetterHelp, quite simply, it's a great opportunity for you to get therapy and let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. All you got to do is visit betterhelp.com/lockedonnba. You can get 10% off your first month. BetterHelp.com/lockedonnba is where you get 10% off of your first month. You say, hey, I might not need therapy. Well, look, if you're thinking about starting it, BetterHelp is where you should go because one, it's entirely online. You ain't got to get out of your car and go here and go there. It's completely convenient for you. And since it's online, it can be flexible. It can be suited for your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And look, you may not like your initial therapist. That's cool with BetterHelp. Just switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. You heard me right. You can switch therapists anytime, no additional charge. Go check it out right now. BetterHelp.com/lockedonnba. And remember, if you start today, you get 10% off of your first month. Again, BetterHelp.com/lockedonnba. Coming up next on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to talk about two-way deals, two-way status of the current Grizzlies. Stay tuned for that. Welcome back, everyone, to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host today, Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal here in Memphis, Tennessee. And we've talked about a lot here. We talked about Kenneth Lofton Jr., right? Where is he going to play on the Grizzlies team in the season, when the season gets here? We also talked about what's left to see in Summer League. I came to a conclusion. For me, Jake LaRavia, David Roddy, you don't really need to see more in this setting. You need to see more with the main Grizzlies team, but you don't need to see more in this setting. I think the things that I wanted to see, we've seen up to this point from those guys. But there are a couple other guys that we got to discuss as well. We talked about G.G. Jackson. We've talked about Jake LaRavia, David Roddy, Kenneth Lofton Jr. The other two guys who are currently on the Grizzlies roster, the main roster, it's Vince Williams and Jacob Gilyard. And if you watched Vince Williams early on in Summer League, you saw how well he can shoot the ball. This is something I've said for a while. And if you watched him with the hustle, little time he did play down there, if you watched him, VCU kid, Vince Williams is always, that left-handed stroke is smooth. He can shoot. He can shoot the basketball real well. The thing about Vince Williams is, outside of shooting, he doesn't really have the advanced offensive skill set to do a little bit more off the dribble, playmaking and things like that. At least not yet. That's the difference between him being on the two-way and guys like Jake LaRavia and David Roddy, because I think he's a better shooter than those guys. If you're just talking about straight-up shooting, Vince Williams is the best shooter that the Grizzlies got from that draft class. Jake LaRavia is a very good shooter too, but Vince Williams is the best one. The thing is, Jake LaRavia can, when you close out on him, he can attack you off the dribble, get to the midi. He can post you up. He can attack smaller guys. Vince Williams, not as inept at finishing around the rim and attacking those closeouts and things like that. In the NBA, once guys catch on that he's a great shooter, then they'll start guarding him like Luke Kennard, staying attached, not leaving you. And as we saw with Luke Kennard, the difference between Luke Kennard and Desmond Bane, because we're talking about minimal differences here, right? Small differences in terms of, yes, they're both great shooters, Desmond Bane and Luke Kennard. But the reason that Desmond Bane is a max level player for the Grizzlies and Luke Kennard is making 14, 15 million a year is because Desmond Bane has much more to his game. He can attack closeouts better, and he can still get his three-point shot off, whereas we've seen Luke Kennard, sometimes it's tough to get three-point shots off. But all that leads me to the point of this. From what we've seen from Vince Williams, is it enough to say this guy is a candidate to be on the main roster? And again, same situation as Kenneth Lofton Jr. Same exact situation. What I said in the first segment kind of applies to Vince Williams, just to a lesser degree. I'm not talking about cracking the rotation with Vince Williams like I was Kenneth Lofton Jr. But with Vince Williams, I'll say it like this. He deserves a spot on that 15-man roster. But again, I got to take my own advice. Because if I say, yeah, you got to put Vince Williams on the main roster, who do you take off? Take off John Conchar after you just gave him an extension and you eat that dead money? You take off Zaire Williams? You take off Josh Christopher? Who do you take off? And the Grizzlies are over 15, by the way. They have 17 players on the roster right now. So it's not just who do you take off. You're taking off two guys already. So in addition to those two guys, who are you taking off? Vince Williams, the three-point shooting is plus. The defense is plus. You put him on a two-way contract. That means in the regular season, you're going to get games potentially where he can be counted on. And that's why I think that's where he'll end up staying, at least for now, because we haven't talked about it a lot. But I don't want to scare anybody when I say this, but Desmond Bane still isn't healthy yet. It wasn't an expectation for him to be healthy right now. In fact, talking to him in Vegas, Desmond Bane told me, if anything, he's either on track or ahead of the curve right now. So don't take what I just said the wrong way. All I'm saying is Desmond Bane's like Kendrick Perkins says. Desmond Bane basically just started doing like calf raises. Like that's where he is in his recovery process. It's going to take a little while for him to build up and do, all those Desmond Bane workouts we're used to seeing. The season will get here. And Desmond Bane is expected to be healthy when the season does get here. But I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of the season you're not seeing Desmond Bane play those normal Desmond Bane minutes. And they're going to be minutes available at the two-guard spot. I think that's where Vince Williams as a backup, because, again, I think Luke Kennard is potentially going to be in the starting lineup. As a backup at the two-guard spot, John Conchar, maybe you could slide there. But I think Vince Williams could factor into that conversation. That's where that two-way deal comes into play, because he'll be able to play in a certain amount of games. And the thing about two-ways is they aren't eligible to be on the postseason roster. And I don't think that's a big deal right now at this point, barring something unforeseen happening in the regular season. The other guy we need to talk about is Jacob Gilyard. Jacob Gilyard is not really the guy that many of you are aware of, because he wasn't on a two-way deal until the very end of the regular season, right before the postseason with the Grizzlies, because his two-way deal came at the expense of Kenneth Lofton Jr. being elevated to the main roster and Kennedy Chandler being cut. The Grizzlies needed another point guard. Jacob Gilyard played, I think, the last regular season game of the season, and that was it. If you watch the Memphis Hustle, you're familiar with Jacob Gilyard, but if that's it, if that's the only thing you've watched, not too familiar with his game until recently. You see the playmaking potential, and some people will say, it's summer league. So you got to remember, these guys, even though Jacob Gilyard is familiar with Vince Williams' game, Jake LaRavia's game, David Roddy, and Kenneth Lofton Jr. Still, these guys did not play together a lot. They played together down with the hustle, but it wasn't a lot. Jake LaRavia was back and forth up with the Grizzlies early in the season, then went down to the hustle, played a decent amount of game. David Roddy, same thing. Went down there, got some work in, but he eventually found himself in a very comfortable spot on the Grizzlies' main roster. Vince Williams, he was down there. He was also with the Grizzlies on the big team. Kenneth Lofton Jr. played down there, but wasn't, played down there more than he played with the Grizzlies. But it's still, it wasn't every single game. The point is, Jacob Gilyard is having to learn how to play with those guys, even though he's already played with them in dosages. And they've looked better on the floor when he's on the floor than when he's off the floor. And the point is, the Grizzlies will have a decision to make soon. I think as of right now, Jacob Gilyard's two-way status is safe. And I know a lot of people talk about the other guys that are currently on standard contracts that you could potentially move to a two-way. There are a lot of moving parts that would have to happen for that to happen, because you can't just demote a guy to a two-way contract, and that guy one would have to accept that. So it sounds easy, but it's a lot easier to upgrade a guy from a two-way to a standard deal than it is to demote a guy from the standard deal to a two-way contract. I think Jacob Gilyard, his spot is safe for now. We'll see what happens in terms of other releases around the NBA and what happens on that standpoint, because there may be the opportunity for some Grizzlies to go out there and get a guy and put him on a two-way deal and have a more depth at the point guard position, because I think early on in the season, point guard depth will be important, but that's why they went out and got Derrick Rose, as we were talking about, getting another guard. That's why they have Marcus Smart in the fold. They have those two guys. And then you have Desmond Bane, who can play at that position in a pinch as well. So they have the depth there right now, but Jacob Gilyard is another depth piece, and I think his spot is safe for now as well. But looking forward to seeing all those guys play in more Summer League action. The Grizzlies have 2 games left. It's part of the Summer League, I guess you can say, the regular season Summer League games. But then when the tournament, the do-or-die games start, lose, go home in the tournament, the Grizzlies will be playing for the lives at that point. So looking forward to seeing how all of that plays out. Thank you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies today. Make sure you tune in tomorrow. Going to have a special guest for you. Got to talk about one of the newest acquisitions to the Grizzlies. Got a special guest to really break it down as well. So stay tuned for that as well. But thank you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies today. Everyone, remember, Locked On Grizzlies is free and available wherever you get your podcast. Until next time, I'm Damichael Cole, and I'll see you on Locked On Grizzlies.